My name is Nora Ashford. I'm 31. On the second day of my daughter's life, I stood outside a stone gate, holding her against my chest, 2 suitcases someone else had packed, beside me on the curb. Behind that door, my mother-in-law had just told me there was no place in her house for a useless wife. My husband watched from an upstairs window. He never opened it. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there in the June heat, doing math, because that's what I do for a living. Then a gray car pulled up, and my mother stepped out with a lawyer and a folder that would knock that family's whole world sideways. Nobody expected it, least of all me. Let me back up. I grew up with my mother, Marlene, in half a rented duplex. She spent 30 years reading contracts other people were too excited to read, and she raised me on one rule: read it before you sign it. We weren't rich, but we were careful. I used to press my face to other people's windows on the walk home and wonder what it felt like to belong to a house instead of just renting one. Every town has a family like the Callaways. Stone gates, their name on half the buildings downtown, 3 generations smiling in front of the same fireplace every Christmas. I met their son, Ethan, through work. I did the books for their family's furniture store. He was warm, funny, easy to love. 8 months in, he brought me home to meet Eleanor, who looked at me like she was checking a chair for hidden cracks. We married under a tent she picked, in front of 200 guests I barely knew. I kept my last name, the one fight I won, and it cost me 10 degrees of warmth in that house for a year. We moved into their east wing temporarily. Within weeks, Eleanor handed me a leather ledger. Every couple paid rent, she said sweetly, and since I was a wizard with numbers, I'd also be keeping the family's books for free. I found the leak fast. Money bleeding out every month to something called HR Servicing LLC. No file, no explanation. When I asked Ethan's father, he just turned up the Gulf Channel. When I asked Ethan, he kissed my forehead and said, "It's my parents, trust me." So I did what my mother taught me. I said yes to everything and quietly kept my own book hidden in my nightstand, writing down every number nobody else wanted read. Then I found out I was pregnant, and that's when the house started deciding, very politely, that I was worth less than I used to be. I told myself I wasn't planning anything. I was just a bookkeeper, doing what bookkeepers do, writing everything down. Every rent payment, every renovation receipt. $38,000 poured into that carriage house. $33,000 handed over to the family in 3 years. No strategy, just sandbags stacked 1 page at a time. Then one night, walking the hallway because I couldn't sleep, I heard Eleanor on the phone. Her voice was low and sharp in a way the garden club never heard. This household cannot carry a mouth that doesn't work. I told myself she meant an employee, a vendor, anyone but me. 8 months pregnant, you believe what you can survive believing. The carriage house was finished, brass knobs warm in the light, my window exactly where I'd fought for it. I asked when we could move in, and the stalling began, so smooth I almost missed it. After the inspection, there was no inspection. After the insurance is sorted, I offered to sort it myself. We'll see, after the baby. Then one afternoon, I watched from the window as 2 men carried folding tables and boxes of committee banners straight into my kitchen, my brass knobs, my window, my future nursery, and stacked them where the crib was supposed to go. When I asked at dinner, Eleanor didn't even look up. Storage, temporarily. It's not as if anyone's living there.
A week later, she held out her hand in the front hall. "Let me hold the carriage house key, dear. The painters need access." The painting was already done. I'd paid for it. But I was 36 weeks pregnant and tired of fighting, so I worked the key off my ring and set it in her palm. She never gave it back. My daughter came in June, 2 days late, screaming like an alarm. 14 hours of labor, and the only person who stayed the whole time was my mother, reading a paperback between contractions like she was standing guard at a border. Ethan showed up in hour 11, hair wild, talking about an emergency at the store, something about refinancing he'd explain later. That word again, refinancing. Eleanor visited that evening for exactly 10 minutes. She looked into the bassinet at her first grandchild and said, flat as weather, "A girl." Then she straightened the flowers my mother had brought and handed me a gift bag with an empty silver frame inside. Empty, waiting for a christening photo that would never happen in that house. That night, my mother sat beside me in the hospital bed in the dark and said, "When they discharge you and you go back to that house, if anything happens, anything, you call me before you argue with anyone. Promise me." I promised. I didn't ask why. Some part of me already knew she wasn't guessing. Discharge morning, Ethan texted, "Store crisis. Take a cab, I'll meet you at home." So I strapped my daughter into a cab and rode back to the house with the stone gate, proud of it even then. The cab pulled away and left us on the curb, and there, on the porch, in the shade, sat 2 suitcases. Mine, my winter coat folded neatly on top, packed for a season I wouldn't be spending there. My key stopped halfway into the lock. New hardware, bright and unused. I rang the bell of the house I'd lived in for 3 years, holding a baby born into its name the day before. The door opened 4 inches and caught on the chain. Eleanor's face through the gap was arranged like a form letter. "Ethan needs a clean start. This household needs contributors. You've been a lovely guest, but guests don't stay forever." I said we lived there. She tilted her head and delivered the line the whole town would eventually repeat in hushed voices. "There's no room in this house for a useless wife." The door clicked shut, not slammed, closed, which is worse. Above me, a window opened just enough for me to see him, Ethan, my husband, standing behind the glass with his arms crossed, close enough to have heard every word. He looked away first. I sat down on the suitcase and called my mother. 4 seconds of silence, then her voice steady as a scale. "Are you and the baby safe? Sit tight, 20 minutes." She arrived in her gray sedan, going faster than I'd ever seen her drive. A silver-haired lawyer named Raymond Cole climbing out of the passenger side with a briefcase. My mother held my daughter first, eyes closed, like she was drinking water after a long thirst. Then she said, "Get in the car. I don't do business on other people's sidewalks." Parked under an elm 2 streets over, she opened a folder on the center console, and the ground under 3 years of my life quietly gave way. The Calloway house, the gate, the oak door, the chain lock, was carried by a private mortgage, not from a bank, but from a note, bought and sold like an old piano. And 4 years ago, that note had been purchased quietly by a one-woman company registered to my mother's half of a rented duplex. "Mom," I said, "you hold their house." "I hold the debt sitting on their house," she corrected, the way she'd correct a trainee at the escrow desk. Different thing. Her lawyer added, dry as an audit, as of 90 days ago, the Callaways were over $11,000 behind. My mother had known for years. She'd bought the field between our family and the wildfire, she said, because she'd read what was really holding that roof up, and she'd never told me, because if I knew, I couldn't live there honestly. That night, in my childhood bedroom, I nursed my daughter and stared at that folder until sunrise. I let myself imagine burning it all down, foreclosure, an auction sign on that stone gate, Eleanor carrying her own suitcases down those porch steps. It tasted sweet for exactly as long as sugar tastes good when you're sick. Then I pictured my daughter at 5 years old, asking why her other grandmother had nowhere to live, and me handing her a war as an inheritance. So I wrote 3 lines in the back of the baby's feeding log, like closing a hard year of books. Burn it down, use the debt to force my way back in, or collect exactly what was owed and walk away clean. In the morning, my mother set 2 plates of eggs on the table, sat across from me, and asked her question with the salt shaker still in her hand. I can call that loan tomorrow.
My mother laid it out plain over eggs. She could accelerate the loan, foreclose, let the lawyers do the whole ugly parade. Raymond said we'd win, just not pretty. Or she could shred the file, sell the note to some faceless pension fund, and let time do what time always does to houses like that on its own. "It's not my sidewalk they left you on," she said, setting down the salt shaker. "So it's not my call. What do you want?" I looked at Wren, 2 days old, owing nothing, guilty of nothing, and answered as the only thing I actually am, not a Callaway, not a victim, a bookkeeper. I want to close the account, correct, to the dollar. Done. By Monday, Raymond had the Callaways' old family attorney on the phone, reading him 2 numbers, the arrears and the recorded instrument number on the mortgage. The line went dead quiet. A meeting was set for Thursday, their office, neutral ground. I overruled it. "The porch," I said. For 3 years, every hard conversation in that family happened on their terrain. The one time the terms were truly theirs, they'd chosen a chain lock and a public sidewalk to teach me my worth. This time, we'd use the front door. Thursday morning, in the blazer I wear to client audits, I knocked on that 100-year-old oak, 3 even raps. Eleanor opened it in full pearls, the same speech already loading behind her eyes, and got as far as my name before Raymond stepped forward and handed her a single white envelope. "Counsel for the note holder, ma'am. You'll want to read this." I watched her posture come apart in stages, eyebrows, mouth, shoulders, then her hand finding the doorframe like a railing on ice. "This is some trick," she said, and for the first time in 3 years her voice had no committee in it at all. My mother spoke one sentence, calm as 30 years behind a desk. "The servicer collects it. I own it. Doorway or table?" For the first time since I'd married into that family, the door opened all the way for an Ashford. At the cherrywood table, Harold arrived already gray. He'd known the word default long before he knew the name behind it. Ethan came down the same stairs he'd once watched me from and stopped on the last step, taking in his wife, his mother-in-law, a lawyer, and the family's whole financial history laid out like an autopsy. Eleanor rallied once, reaching for the old committee voice. This family built half this town, and my mother let her finish, because my mother believes people confess at the ends of their sentences. Then she folded her hands and said the truest thing anyone said that day. "We don't buy names, Eleanor. We buy ground, and the ground under yours has been in my handbag for 4 years." And then something in Eleanor just gave out. She sat down hard, pearls swinging, and for one unguarded moment she wasn't the queen of Birchwood Lane. She was a woman remembering her own first year in that house, eating at the children's table, paying and paying until she decided the fee was simply what love cost. Our eyes met, and for 2 honest seconds we understood each other completely. She'd been me. She'd just called it tradition instead of a toll. I slid 1 page across the table. $38,000 documented for the carriage house. My belongings returned intact. A quiet, uncontested separation. In exchange, the arrears got restructured and the note sold to a stranger who'd never know their name from any other account number. Nobody would lose the house because of me. Then I walked out to the porch and set the brass carriage house key on the railing, exactly where my suitcases had once sat. "I'm giving back the only thing yours I ever wanted," I said. Ethan called my name from the doorway. I didn't turn around twice. "You know where my mother's door is," I told him. "You've never once used it." I walked down those 6 steps at my own pace, my mother and my lawyer falling in beside me like a small, correctly sized parade. The neighbors' curtains twitched. Let them take notes. Grief has good manners. It waited until we got home. That night I cried in my childhood bedroom, not for Eleanor, barely even for Ethan, but for the family in the lit window I'd wanted my whole life, the dream I'd paid $67,000 in tuition to stand inside. I buried it at 31, in a room with old band posters still on the closet door. Ethan's voicemail came at 9. "A few weeks, we'll figure it out. I love you." His whole vocabulary of love was a long quest for extensions. I signed the divorce papers at my mother's kitchen table, under the same lamp where she once taught me long division. My hand shook, not from doubt, from the strange grief of closing a 5-year account. Then I opened the notebook from my nightstand, the one where I'd quietly kept records for 3 years, and I ruled a double line under the last entry. Account closed. Nothing carried forward. The Callaways paid every dollar within 6 months. The boat went first, then Harold's parade car. My boxes came back packed with more care than I expected, Eleanor's hand unmistakably. The separation went uncontested. I got sole custody of Wren. Ethan gets his Saturdays, gentle as ever. Gentle was never what was missing. My mother kept her word, too. The note sold quietly to an out-of-state servicer, and the Callaway name became 7 digits in a portfolio between a ranch house and a duplex, the most democratic thing that family ever experienced. "I bought it as a firewall," she said, signing the transfer. "Never wanted a throne. Thrones need dusting." By spring, a for sale sign stood outside the stone gate. It sold in August to a perfectly ordinary family with a trampoline. The Callaways moved into a townhouse near the club. Nobody foreclosed. Nobody had to. A borrowed name came due on its own, and I simply stopped making the payments on it. My bookkeeping practice reopened that fall. Same one-room office, new sign. My old clients came back and brought friends, and a strange little side practice grew. Young women sliding prenups and family ledgers across my desk, asking me to read the fine print before they signed. I never charge for those. Call it a tithe to the escrow desk my mother worked 30 years. Wren turned 1 that June. We took a photo on my mother's porch, a little crooked, badly lit, the only 3-generation portrait I've ever actually been in. It hangs in my office now, where somebody else's fireplace photo used to live in my imagination. I've looked at it every day for a year and never once missed the fireplace. My key ring holds exactly 2 keys now, my office and a small rented house 4 doors down from my mother's porch, with a porch just big enough for 2 chairs and a bassinet. Nobody holds a key to my life for the painters anymore. It took me 31 years to understand what my mother tried to tell me over meatloaf when I was 12. So let me hand it to you for free, no ledger attached. A family that makes you pay your way in was never offering family. It was renting you a seat, and the rent never stops rising. The people who are truly yours pull the chair out at 3 in the morning with no ledger in the house at all, because love that keeps books isn't love, it's a mortgage. And someday, someone always calls the note.